Hi, I'm Albert. Thanks for watching vlogs about nothing. And so I want to talk about a pretty important topic right now, which is homelessness. I want to talk about three different parts of homelessness. I want to talk about how it impacts and affects the entire community. I want to talk about how it impacts and affects the individual person and or populace that's going through homelessness. And then finally, I want to talk about what we can do to help solve the homelessness problem, right? Because I think we can all relate to the feeling that when we see somebody who has far less than us, so much less than us that they literally have no roof over their head, we feel like we want to help them. And that's a very basic, appropriate, healthy feeling to have when you see another human being suffering. And in fact, I would furthermore argue that if you do not feel that way when you see another human being suffering, there's something wrong with you. And I'm not a doctor, but I would definitely recommend you going to see a doctor, because the moment that you lose the empathy that is embedded in all of our genes, then that is truly the moment that you might be at a different part in your life and need some other kinds of help, because it's only natural to want to help those that have less, and it's in all of our best interests. Let's talk about that. So it impacts all of our local communities in various different ways. People will often argue that there's an uptick in crime, and while that is true, it is important to remember that the kind of crime we're talking about increasing with the homelessness population is nonviolent crime, most often associated with property crime, right? When you don't even have a home and you need to get money, you are probably going to steal things. You're probably going to do things of that nature. And that's why there's an increase in the property crime, right? Property is easily replaceable. There's nothing wrong with property. There are some people who will argue that there is also a direct correlation between both violent crimes, property crimes, and being homeless. And there is no conclusive evidence to suggest this straightforward linear correlation, specifically between violent crime and homelessness. There is a distinct direct correlation that is linear when it pertains to, or as it concerns, property crime and homelessness. But again, that should be a no-brainer, right? And as much as we all like our stuff, I feel like we should be more concerned with why people want to steal our stuff to begin with. And trust me, it's not because it's as cool as we think we are, right? It's most likely because somebody needs something. And while we may want to play judge and jury here in terms of what that money may or may not be for, we still have to understand that they have so much less than us. So when we lose something that we can replace via insurance or job, a little more hard work, I don't know what you can do to replace material objects other than those things, because they literally don't mean anything. But that's a way to think about it, right? And so I want to talk about how it impacts. And so just to kind of leave that point of the three behind, it does impact our community, but just not so much as it impacts the actual individuals, right? And this includes, and I'll just be quick here, the availability of jobs as it concerns the rest of us. I mean, lots of people don't want to do certain jobs that are constantly open and in turnover position, and unfortunately they can't be filled by people who could actually utilize those jobs, because there's so much wrong with being homeless that it's hard to fill jobs that might otherwise be filled if these people weren't homeless. And so it impacts our individuals, our friends, our colleagues, our friends, and our other fellow human beings that are homeless, because it literally increases their chance of dying by homicide by a little under 60% compared to somebody who has a stable home. And so if your likelihood of dying from homicide is more than half and just under 60% of what other people living in a stable home might encounter, that in itself should be enough for us to literally remind ourselves that being homeless is a matter of life or death. And it quite often can be correlated to such a solution. And I don't want to see people dying for unnecessary reasons, especially not when we can change it and not when we can help them. And so what can we do? That's the final point of our speech for tonight on homelessness. There's a bunch of stuff we can do, right? As individuals, I think it's important to remember that it is up to us to be decent and kind to these individuals. That's at the very least of what we owe. We owe them. We owe them courtesy, kindness, and if we can, the availability of help, right? And so it may not be much, it may not be a lot, but sometimes you never know. A Snickers bar could literally change somebody's life. And while that is a very sad statement to say, it's a little reminder that if you do see somebody out there on the streets that's hurting and they have far, far less than you, it's better to remind yourself that you can do something about it in that very moment if you can and if you so choose. But more importantly, put it in the back of your mind, knowing that as an adult, you can elect officials that have those same kinds of priorities. And while you'll hear often that politicians don't always do what constituents want them to do, I would make the argument that that's because once a politician is in office, constituents very rarely are seeking out that candidate to offer him guidance and or advice as to the best policy that is affecting your life in your neighborhood. And if that's homelessness, there is definitely something the government can do about it, right? And as little as I like Uncle Sam, right, because I love Uncle Sam and then I hate Uncle Sam. I like Uncle Sam because if Uncle Sam chooses to do so, he could literally change the world, or at least change our country, in that we live in a country where we can afford, unequivocally, without question, housing vouchers. We can make not low-income housing neighborhoods, because again, that's removing ourselves away from the point. Making low-income neighborhoods is not a solution. It is, in fact, a problem that exacerbates an existing and already very problematic issue. And so if we can give housing vouchers to people where they can use government money to pay their rent, I think that's the best idea. And if the government's in charge of it, the government can afford it. The government has resources to implement the policy, as well as the resources to follow up, to do things like job placement, to do things like tax advocation, right? I mean, I want everybody to be a taxpayer just as much as the next guy. But unfortunately, we can't get tax money from people who are so far fallen within the cracks in our system that they have behavior often indicative to things that are harmful and or detrimental to our progress and our growth as a society and as a community and or neighborhood. So if we can keep those things in mind, I think that we can go into the future addressing homelessness as it is, which is a problem for everybody, not just a problem for the people who are going through it. And it would be an insult to even consider their plight a problem, because it is by definition and in essence a chaotic, catastrophic situation that requires other human beings to help them. And again, if we're not able and or willing to do that, there might be something bigger wrong with all of us.